Hauptwerk hardware, and I thought while I'm driving today I'd try and make use of the time by making another video for you guys. This one is going to be really basic. This is really an absolute beginner's guide to Hauptwerk and virtual organs and all of that good stuff. It's really aimed at musicians or guys, organists who are used to playing an instrument, whether it be in a church or whether it be an electronic instrument at home, or possibly both. And what we're going to talk about is really what is Hauptwerk, what is a virtual organ, what's all this computer stuff, how much do I need to know about it, can I use it, is it any good for me, is it going to be complicated, and 1,001 other questions that people kind of come up with. I've had inquiries from quite a lot of musicians or organists, and they ask about the products and they've seen some of the videos on here, but they're kind of struggling really to make sense of it all. So this is to help people who have not had anything to do with it before, who are used to playing an ordinary organ, and just want to find out a little bit more about exactly what is this Hauptwerk or virtual organ stuff all about, and how can it help us. So first of all, if you're used to playing a regular organ, it's either going to be a pipe organ or it's going to be an electronic instrument, either at home or in your church. If it's an electronic instrument, and that's the ones that I'm going to concentrate on really in this kind of little discussion, because it's easier to make the connection really between an electronic instrument and a virtual organ. It's kind of an easier thing to see what's going on. So if you've got an electronic organ at home or anywhere else that you play, obviously when you come to play the organ, you sit down, you press the button to switch it on, and then you select some stops and you play some keys, and magically the right sounds, or hopefully the right sounds anyway, come out of the speakers. Now what makes all that work behind the scenes is what we need to take a little bit of an overview sort of look at, and compare how that's different with a virtual organ. So inside the console of your electric organ or electronic organ, there are a number of things which work together to make the sound. So to start with, obviously you've got the keyboards or your manuals, pedals, and you've got the stops and so on and so forth, and they boil down really to nothing more than a whole bunch of electrical switches. So when you press a key down on the keyboard, it makes a contact, and that triggers the sound to come out of the electronics on the organ. When you operate a particular stop to select a certain sound, again it's just a switch. So if you select a 4-foot open diapason, for example, as far as the machine's concerned, it just switches on a sound generator that makes a sound which approximates to that of the 4-foot open diapason. And the different keys on the keyboard, as you press them down, they just trigger different frequencies or sorry, just concentrating on the driving a little bit. Yeah, they just trigger the different frequencies of the different notes for that particular stop which you've got switched on. So what I'm really saying is, whatever you operate on your organ, it's just a switch. It switches stuff on, it switches stuff off, be it the sound, be it the different types of sound, or be it the notes. So what's actually happening when you switch on a stop, you're selecting a sound generator which will hopefully make a sound pretty similar to whatever that stop is called. And then once that sound is generated, it needs to be amplified and it needs to drive the speakers. So what's actually going on inside is you have a number of different sound generators, quite often on a number of different circuit boards on the older organs, and each one of those is switched on by a different stop. That's how you can have different, 4 or 5 different stops all switched on at once, or all of them if you want, because each one simply switches on or off a sound generator. I'm not talking about the modern digital organs here, I'm talking about the more old-fashioned type of analog organs, and some of the early digital organs work that way. The newer ones are computers and they work in a completely different way, so we'll talk about those later. But inside your organ, suffice to say that you have a tone generator, or a number of tone generators. You have an amplifier, which makes the sound louder so that it can drive the speakers, and there will usually be speakers either inside the console or somewhere else in your room, and there's usually a volume control on the console somewhere, and that just adjusts how much signal goes into the amplifier, and consequently how much comes out to drive your speakers. And usually the swell pedal is exactly the same as volume control, but only obviously for the swell keyboard. So that's what's going on in an ordinary electronic organ. And if you want to change any of that beyond its original specification, then it's very difficult to do, because, as I said, each sound is created by a separate tone generator, and if you want to add more sounds, you have to add more tone generators, and if you want to change a sound, you have to modify a tone generator. So clearly doing any of that is kind of well beyond the scope of the average organist, and to be honest, how many people would want to? It's the organ comes with its set of sounds that it comes with. You bought the organ based on what it sounded like, one assumes, so that's kind of pretty much what you've got and what you're stuck with. And if the organ gets old and bits of it stop working, it's not unusual for certain stops or certain sounds to sometimes go out of tune slightly, although that's fairly unusual. What's more usual is they just stop working altogether, and that happens when one of those tone generator boards becomes faulty for whatever reason. Trying to get them repaired is becoming harder and harder. There's very little information for technicians that's publicly available, or even available at all in the industry these days, for the multitude of organs that were out there 20, 30, 40 years ago, and there's still a lot of them left, and that's still what a lot of people are using. So that's the limitations really with the old technology that's inside your electric organ, or electronic organ I should say. All of the new instruments and their horrendous price tags that you can go and dream over in various showrooms, although even those are becoming pretty scarce I think these days, those are basically computers. So if you were to open up the console, you would find the keyboards, the stops and everything else as you had in your old organ, and they're still just a bunch of switches, but instead of connecting to tone boards and things now, they just connect to a computer interface, and at the heart of it all is one or more microprocessor chips and a whole bunch of memory, and in that memory, stored in that memory, are literally recordings of organ pipes or of piano notes or whatever instrument you have available to you in your modern organ. So when you play keys, what happens when you press down a key is that it triggers the playback of a recording of whatever that stop was. So for example, if you select an 8-foot oboe, you press down middle C, what's actually happening is that the computer inside the modern organ sees that you've pressed down that key, and that will trigger the computer or the microprocessor to retrieve the sound of an 8-foot oboe, middle C, from the memory, and to play that through an amplifier to the speakers in your organ. So it's fundamentally different in the way it works to the way that the old analog organs used to work. But it is more versatile. As we said, basically all that's happening is it's playing back these recordings. They're called samples. It's playing back these recordings of the various pipes or instruments that you select. So if you could add, or if you wanted to add more instruments, you could just add more memory with more recordings of different stops or pipes, and then when you select those, the computer would play them. The limiting factor is that all of this goes on sort of behind the scenes, inside your organ. If you've got a modern digital organ, it's all going on inside your organ, and the way the sounds are stored, they're on little electronic chips. They're not on sort of discs or memory sticks or anything like that, so you can't change them, and the reason that they're done that way is because it's very, very fast for the processor to be able to read them, compared to removable media, and also it just makes it simple. All you have to do is sit down in front of the organ, switch the thing on, pull the stops you want and play, and all of the clever stuff happens inside the organ. Nothing is getting changed by the user in terms of its kind of core operation. So it gives you nice faithful reproduction of the sounds because they're recordings, but you're still limited a bit in terms of whatever sounds the organ comes with is or are the sounds that you're going to have forever, and you can't really change them. Yes, technically you can, but I'm talking for the average user. You can't really change them, and you know, you buy the organ based on the sounds it's got, and that's it. So the Hauptwerk idea, the virtual organ idea, is basically taking that computer inside the modern organ and replacing it with a computer like the one you use for doing your email or browsing the internet and all the other kind of stuff. And that makes it much more versatile, because obviously the memory in a computer like the one you use for browsing the internet, you're in control of what's stored in that memory. For example, if you download a picture from the internet and you store it on your computer, you've now taken a new set of data, a picture, and you've stored it on the computer. It's very simple to do. Everybody is doing it all the time these days. So there's nothing to say that you can only download pictures and movies and all this kind of stuff onto a computer. Obviously, there are other things you can download, one of them being sample sets, or sets of samples, sets of recordings, if you want, of the different sounds of the different pipes of the different organs. And that's really the idea behind Hauptwerk. A bunch of guys have gone out and they've gone round and recorded all of the pipes in all of the situations of a whole bunch of magnificent organs from around the world, and they've brought all this information together on the Hauptwerk website, and there are even others that you can get from other websites as well that will work with Hauptwerk. And Hauptwerk is just a mechanism to play those sounds. So all you need to do is connect all of the switches and keyboards on your organ to a computer that's running Hauptwerk software or other virtual organ software. There are 2 or 3 others as well. It's probably more than that actually, but there are kind of 2 or 3 other big ones. Grand Org comes to mind. I know there's another one, the name of which escapes me at the moment. But they all do the same thing. They allow you to control them from the keys on your organ, and they will play back the sounds of these sample sets. And they're available for all different sorts of organs from all different sorts of places all around the world. So once you've got your console set up to work with this, you can basically make it sound like any of these organs from anywhere around the world that have been sampled already. That's basically the idea. In terms of practicalities, it requires that you connect your computer to the keyboards and the stops and everything on your organ or on your console, and there is a standard for doing that now, because to connect to a computer, everything needs to be the same everywhere. Otherwise it would be a nightmare. You know, you'd have one person that's recorded one set of sounds and they've done it in this way, and you need this special program to play it back, and you need to connect your keys in this way to make it work and so on, and somebody else does it differently and somebody else does that differently. And bearing in mind that there's a big collaboration worldwide of people who are working to provide good sounds, good sample sets for this type of thing. If everyone did it differently, it wouldn't really work. So the sample sets, yes, there are a few different standards for those, but in terms of actually controlling the software that's going to play them, so in terms of controlling Hauptwerk or whatever other virtual organ software you may choose, there is a standard, and the standard is called MIDI. MIDI. It stands for Musical Instrument Digital Interface. And what it does is it allows you to control one musical instrument from another. So in our case, if we have a computer, just like the one at home, in fact you can even use the one at home, running Hauptwerk or other virtual organ software, and you plug its speaker output into a nice big amplifier with a nice big speaker, you can control the virtual organ running on that computer via these MIDI signals, Musical Instrument Digital Interface. And that is a universal control system that's used in musical instruments, in music studios, all over the place. It's been around for years, and that's how that side of it works. So if you want to be able to play these virtual organs, if you want to use virtual organ software, then you need to convert your console to produce these MIDI signals. And in computer terms, they're very simple. When you press a key down on the keyboard, it sends a note on command for that particular note, and all the notes have numbers. So middle C, for example, is note number 60, and every semitone above and below that is one note number above or below that. So middle C sharp is note number 61, D is 62, and so on. The range of notes goes from 0 to 127, giving us 128 notes right across the full compass. And there are 16 different channels available within the MIDI standard, so you can have 16 keyboards to, if you want to look at it that way, but more usually you'd have 3 or 4 keyboards and manuals, and each one would be configured to use a different MIDI channel. And then when you play these keyboards, if for example the great is MIDI channel 1, the swell's MIDI channel 2, and the solo's MIDI channel 3, as you play the different notes, then the different note numbers with their on or off commands will be sent through MIDI to control the Hauptwerk virtual organ. And that's what the encoders that I sell, that I make and sell under the Hauptwerk hardware name, that's what they're for, that's what they do. And basically it allows people to take an older organ, rip the guts out of it effectively, leaving behind the original switches and everything else for the stops and the keys and so on, and then they can connect these up to the hardware that I sell, and then they use that hardware to control the MIDI computer, if you want, the Hauptwerk computer, the computer running the virtual organ software, so that they can play that organ. The virtual organ software is kind of the base, if you like, that you can use, or that you add different sample sets to. It's a bit like saying the Hauptwerk software is your car and you can drive it to different places. Well, your Hauptwerk software is what does all the work, and you can load in different sample sets to hear them however or whenever you want. So when you first set up Hauptwerk on your computer, it comes with, there is actually a free edition of Hauptwerk that you can set up. That comes with a free sample set, and that's from the St Anne's Church, the organ in the St Anne's Church in Moseley near Birmingham in the UK. And you can just load those pipe samples into the software and play them quite happily. And if you've got bored with that by lunchtime, in the afternoon you can download a different sample set from hauptwerk.com or from any other source that you may know of. Say there's lots of them out there now. You could load that in and then you'd be playing a different organ, a completely different organ, simply by just downloading and installing the different sample sets. So that's the attraction. It allows you to change what sounds you have available to you, and basically what instruments you're playing. So hopefully that's explained quite a lot, made it easier for you. I hope that it's answered more questions than it's kind of raised. In terms of taking an older organ and actually converting that to work with Hauptwerk and getting it all up and running on a computer and so on and so forth, there's quite a lot of people that look at that and go, oh, that looks really hard, I couldn't do that, so they shy away from it. Well, if that's you and you do want to have a bash at it, you've got an organ perhaps that's not quite working as well as it used to, you trade that in, you buy another one, you're looking at thousands of pounds probably to replace that organ. And if you're looking at maybe having a bit of fun, or even seriously requiring or wanting to play with the different sounds from these different organs, it doesn't have to be a DIY job. If you're in the UK, I can come and do that for you. That's one of the services I provide. It's a consultancy and an organ build service. If you're in Australia, there's a guy down there who does it for you as well. He travels around. In fact, I think he's even got a virtual organ in the back of his van. He's got a big van down there. So there are people out there that will do it for you. And even if you were to kind of employ the services of a local engineering technician, and then to buy the hardware from me, and then say to the guy, okay, look, this is what I want to do. I want you to install this stuff as per the instructions on this website, as per my videos, etc., etc. Whatever that guy charges, even if he's a top professional, it's still going to be cheaper for you than going out and buying a new organ. That is almost guaranteed. So the options are that you can kind of do it as a DIY thing if you're good with a pair of cutters and soldering iron and bits of wire and you enjoy that kind of thing. Happy days. We sell the hardware to do that with. You can just buy that off the website, you can put it all together yourself, and you can have great fun with this stuff. If you are more musically inclined than mechanically inclined or electrically inclined, and you don't want to start fiddling around with all that stuff, you can get somebody to come in and do that for you. Or the third option, I suppose, is to look around for a newer organ that's digital, which has a MIDI output, so that you can just plug that into a computer running Hauptwerk. That's a less reliable option because you're relying on however that organ has been configured at the factory. Well, you're relying on whatever limitations they've configured at the factory, let's put it that way, in terms of what MIDI signals it can send. So sometimes that might sound like the easy way, but actually it can end up being a bit tricky to do. So I hope that's explained a lot more for you. If you do have any more questions or anything, you can either stick them in the comments below, or you can send me an email at the Hauptwerk hardware website. Again, the link's below in the text there, or the email to send it to me, which is contact@hauptwerkhardware.com. And finally, I just want to point out that I'm not affiliated to the Hauptwerk company or Hauptwerk software in any way. Hauptwerk is a trade name. It's owned by Milan Digital Audio. You can go and look at their website, hauptwerk.com, or Milan Digital Audio. Search for that on Google. Those guys are nothing to do with me. I'm simply using the software that they make and trying to provide an easy way for you guys to use that software as well. So it's just important, just for legal reasons really, just to make it clear that I'm not affiliated to those guys at all. And this is completely separate. So there we go. Hope it's been helpful. It's used up a little bit of the time whilst I've been driving, hopefully in a positive way, and hope it's helped somebody out. So thanks very much for watching. We'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.